The night was alive with shadows and snarls, the desert wind carrying the scent of blood and danger, when Luke Harding, a cowboy hardened by years of cattle drives and loneliness, stumbled upon the clearing lit only by a pale moon. There, surrounded by wild coyotes with teeth flashing white, stood a young Apache girl no older than 20, barefoot, her long black hair whipping across her face, her eyes wide yet unbroken, holding nothing but a jagged stick against the snapping beasts. Without hesitation, Luke fired 2 shots into the night sky, the sound cracking like thunder and scattering the coyotes into the brush. The girl sagged against the tree trunk, chest heaving, yet her gaze locked on him with mistrust sharper than any blade. "You'll hurt me now?" she whispered, voice hoarse from fear and exhaustion. Luke shook his head slowly, lowering his gun. "Not a chance, miss. You're safe with me." She staggered, her knees buckling, and he caught her before she fell, her weight surprisingly light despite the strength that radiated from her frame. As he lifted her onto his horse, she resisted weakly, muttering in Apache words he didn't know but felt in his bones. Words of pride, of refusal, of warning. "Easy now," he murmured. "You're safe. I got you." When they reached his lonely ranch, she tried to refuse his help again, her spirit refusing to bow, but her body betrayed her. He carried her inside, laid her gently near the hearth, and when he draped a blanket over her shivering form, she tensed, whispering through clenched teeth, "I do not belong to you." Luke's voice was calm, steady as the prairie sky. "I don't want to own you, girl. I just want you alive come morning." At dawn, the girl stirred awake, her dark eyes darting to every corner of the cabin, her body coiled like a wildcat ready to flee. Luke poured coffee and slid a plate of biscuits toward her, but she shoved it away, muttering something sharp in Apache before finally spitting out the words in broken English. "No trust. Cowboys take, use, leave." Her voice dripped with a bitterness that cut deeper than any knife, and Luke felt the weight of sins committed by men who looked like him but carried cruelty in their veins. "I ain't like them," he said softly, his gaze steady. "I ain't here to hurt you." She studied him with hawk-like suspicion, her hunger betraying her pride as she finally grabbed a biscuit, devouring it in trembling bites. He asked her name, but she ignored him, staring into the flames as though they held answers he never could. For days she lingered near the edges of his world, never straying far, but never letting her guard fall either. She refused to eat at his table, choosing instead the floor by the fire, and when he offered her the bed, she snapped, "My people sleep on Earth." "Not in cages." Luke didn't argue. He simply laid his own blanket near the door and kept silent watch each night. Slowly, though, the walls between them cracked. She began tending the horses, her hands steady and sure, whispering to them in her native tongue until they obeyed as though bewitched. Jacob, Luke's young neighbor boy who often visited, marveled at her skill, whispering to Luke one evening, "She's like magic." Luke agreed silently, though he dared not say it aloud. Her spirit was untamed, fierce, but in that fire he saw not danger but something beautiful, something worth protecting. The fragile calm shattered when a group of drunken ranch hands rode through one night, seeking trouble as much as whiskey. They spotted her drawing water from the well, her long hair shining in the moonlight, and their laughter turned to jeers. "Look what Harding's keeping here," one sneered, dismounting. "A little Apache prize. Bet she scratches real good." The girl froze, her jaw tight, but before she could react, Luke stormed from the barn, fists clenched. "Back in your saddles," he growled. "She's not yours to look at, not yours to touch." The men laughed, circling him, but they hadn't reckoned on the girl herself. With a cry like a wildcat, she seized the bucket's chain and swung it, striking one man across the jaw, sending him sprawling. Chaos erupted, fists flying, curses ringing through the night, until Luke stood back to back with her, his strength and her fury blending into an unstoppable force. When the dust settled, the men slunk off nursing wounds and shame, muttering threats they dared not fulfill. Breathing hard, her hair tangled and face streaked with dirt, the girl turned to Luke, her chest heaving. "Why?" she demanded, her voice breaking with confusion. "Why you fight for me?" Luke wiped blood from his lip, his eyes never leaving hers. "Because you're worth fighting for." The words struck her silent, her fierce eyes softening for the first time, though she quickly turned away, whispering, "You will regret this. Men always regret me." But Luke's heart had already decided. Otherwise, days stretched into weeks, and with each sunrise, the distance between them narrowed. She still guarded her name like treasure. But she began sharing stories in fragments about her people, about the day soldiers came, about running, always running. Luke listened, never pressing, his silence more comforting than any words. She worked beside him, riding horses no one else could tame, her strength astonishing, her laughter rare but radiant when it came. One evening, after a long day's ride, she collapsed by the fire, exhaustion overtaking her. Luke moved to fetch another blanket, but she caught his wrist, her grip strong despite her fatigue. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You stay." He froze, stunned, until she added in halting English, "No more alone. You sleep near." His heart pounded at the trust hidden in those words, a trust deeper than any kiss. He nodded slowly, lowering himself beside her, their shoulders brushing, the silence thick but not uncomfortable. "You're sleeping with me now," he said gently. A promise more than a command, his tone, soft as the embers glowing in the hearth. She didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned against him, her breath steadying, her eyes fluttering closed as though for the first time in years. She believed she was safe. Luke stared into the fire, his arms slowly wrapping around her shoulders. And in that moment he knew, this was no passing bond, no accident of circumstance. This was the beginning of something unshakable. When spring bloomed, across the plains, the ranch came alive with new calves and green fields, and the girl who once refused even her name now moved through the homestead like she belonged. She revealed it one morning as dawn painted the sky. "Nayeli," she whispered, her voice trembling. "It means I love you." Luke's heart clenched, the name echoing in his chest like a vow. From then on, she was no longer the wild stranger he had saved, but Nayeli, the woman who saved him in return from a life of silence and loneliness. Together they built more than a ranch. They built a home, one rooted in trust, respect, and the fierce bond between two souls the world had tried to break but failed. Neighbors whispered, some in disapproval, others in awe, but neither cared. Each night they sat on the porch as stars lit the endless sky, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest, both knowing that whatever storms lay ahead, they would face them as one. And when Jacob, grinning as always, asked if she was staying forever, Nayeli laughed, her eyes shining, and answered without hesitation, "Yes, I have found where I belong." And that, friends, was the story of how a cowboy's courage and an Apache girl's unbreakable spirit turned fear into trust and loneliness into love. If this tale touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable Wild West stories of grit, passion, and redemption.